Welcome to Messy Liberation, the podcast that dives deep into feminism, business, and personal growth. I'm Becky Mollenkamp.
And I'm Taina Brown. Get ready for another messy conversation through the eyes of two intersectional feminist coaches.
Let's get messy.
Cold.
You're cold?
It. Oh, I'm loving it.
Oh my gosh.
My house is 63 degrees because I haven't turned on the heat, and I had the window open last night and it's cool. I had to go grab a cardigan because I was like, it's cardigan weather. I'm so happy. I love it.
Sweater weather.
Yeah. I am such a basic bitch. Me too. I love me sweater weather. I love autumn. I'm here for it.
Nah. Give me all the sweaters, the cardigans, the turtlenecks, the beanies, the scarves.
Yeah. Like what I call it is comfortable clothes season.
Yes.
Which actually is kind of perfect for today. Because one of the reasons I'm going to just come clean. I texted Taina before this episode and said, I got to be honest, I'm not super feeling today's episode. I love Laura, but I hate all things fitness and diet and body.
Okay.
And so I was like, I really don't want to, I'm just like struggling here. Will you take the lead, Taina? Yeah, here I am taking the lead because I'm just coming clean. Because then Taina was like, yeah, I kind of feel the same way about this stuff, but like, honestly, it's probably why we need to have the conversation. So it's great.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll change your opinion a little bit once we're done. Maybe.
Well, we'll see. That'll be great. So we have Laura Thomas joining us today. And Laura, why don't you tell people why we're talking about the body and
The body.
You being here? Yeah, like tell people what you do.
Yeah. So my name is Laura Thomas. I'm a fitness coach, primarily based in Cleveland, Ohio, although I am allowed to work virtually. So that's really exciting in the greater US. And I've been doing this for, almost 8 years now, which is, I guess about 8 years, which is so wild to me. And I work with women and femmes and thems, because I always love to say I work with all identities. Really want to sort of explore coming back to their body. So I think what a lot of times happens is that, not to get too deep right off the cuff, but what happens is as we, grow up and realize that like our bodies are, commodities, so to speak, and like people can have opinions on them and things like that, that we start to really distance ourselves from our bodies and their capabilities and what they can and can't do. And I really like to bring people back to their body as a home and what it can do, right? And we're all beautifully designed and we're all built differently. And that's not by accident. I think that's definitely on purpose. We're not all meant to be, thin and all look the same and all that kind of stuff and have the same type of body. And I like bringing people back to that to find inner strength in what they can do, which, can be a variety of things. Some people love to strength train. Some people focus more on, just walking and a little bit more of like gentle cardio and things like that. So I never try to critique what feels good for someone. I'm always going to be of the school of, a little bit of resistance training and strength training is good for you because it helps with bone mass. It helps with bone density, especially as we get older. People who are cis women or cis female tend to lose bone mass. I think it's a small percentage each year after 30 or 35. So it's always great to just continue to build that. But that can look like a million different ways, right? It doesn't mean you have to go to a gym and bro it out and, do all that kind of stuff and be in a very uncomfortable place for you. And a lot of women aren't comfortable in gyms because of that. And that's completely fair, right? Like gyms, I don't think were really made with marginalized and female identities in mind. I think they were kind of designed with men in mind. So I like to bring people back to their bodies. I do that through alignment, strength, and function, which is something I started doing back in 2024. So instead of throwing people right into a weight training regimen, I really try to work with their body and their spine and their inner strength and get all of that figured out and the foundation established before I even dream of giving somebody a weight and saying, okay, now we're going to start doing loaded exercises. I really try to be more ethical in the way that I approach working with people's bodies.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Taina.
Before you ask a question, I just want to let people know, because you mentioned, Becky, like we love Laura, but we're also, I think you and I would say even Laura, I would argue even Laura, like actively divorcing ourselves from diet culture, right? And all of that negativity. And so I just want to let our people know how we know Laura. We know Laura because she's a part of our Coaches Circle community. We knew her before in a different community. And so You're not a stranger that we're bringing onto our show. You're someone that we've known for quite a while, that we engage with regularly. And so we trust you. We trust what you have to say. And so I'm actually excited to have this conversation because even though the three of us, and I would even venture most of our listeners or viewers are people who are actively divorcing themselves from diet culture, as someone who is now in my middle age era, bone density is something that that I'm thinking about because in the past several years, have just noticed like older women in my life, like my mom and like aunts and my wife's mom and people like that who have lost bone density and the way that that has affected their day-to-day life. And so strength, building up strength is something that's kind of been top of mind for me the past few months. So anyway, go ahead, Becky. I'll throw it back to you.
No, I was going to say, I think it'd be interesting too for us to maybe individually share some of our own stories, because I don't know how deep we've talked about body stuff before. We had Taina Dodson on not too long ago talking about body liberation, so that's a good episode to reference as well.
Yeah.
But I don't
And
know
we
how
have
much.
Marina on too.
Oh yeah, and Marina, that
The
was a
health
while
coach.
back.
Yeah.
Health at any size or every size. But yeah, I don't know how much we've really shared, like maybe personally too, some of our own relationships with our body and our perceptions of our body and our feelings about those perceptions. So I thought that could be kind of interesting. And Laura would probably be a chance too to talk a little bit about how you've come to the place that you are with that. Because I will say, like, one of the reasons I struggle with this is exactly you're talking about, Tanya, of like divorcing ourselves from diet culture. And I'm sure you discover this too, Laura, with clients. That is like, it is an epic journey of
Yeah.
releasing all of that stuff. And then like, I feel like the pendulum can swing very far in the other direction. And I know it has for me, where like my body has changed by 100 pounds plus in my adult years, right? So I've had I've been on the almost too thin, I would argue, size. I'm, pleasantly full now, but I've been at all sorts of stages in between that, and I've gained and lost. So I've done what so many women have done, that like yo-yo dieting of losing and gaining the same 20, 30 pounds and incrementally often edging myself way up. However, I have had that place where I've been very thin. I've also had a place in my life where I've been very, very fit. I ran a marathon. I've run many half marathons. I was a really pretty good runner. I got to a place where I could actually run like a single mile in about 6 minutes. Most of my miles were a little, slower than that. But like I had really, really good fitness for a while in my life. And I actually thought about going down the journey of being a fitness coach, which is what led me ultimately into coaching in a different form, which for me, I think is good, because I think if I had done that, I would have continued to perpetuate all kinds, because I was perpetuating harm when I was in that space. And trying to unpack from diet culture has been so challenging. What I have found, I think, ultimately it really means is learning to decenter men from my life. Because to me, so much of what diet culture is about is actually about being centered inside the male gaze and having your own worth being determined by that. And I don't just mean by, again, because I think even Taina, who is maybe less interested in men than I might be, even though I also like women, but I mean like the definitions of beauty as created by men. So even people who don't care about men valuing their bodies, we still, like, often, I think even many lesbians, I think many bisexual women, like I think women, heterosexual women, we judge women, other women, based on beauty standards that have been set by men for us, right? And then we internalize those, and then we also use them to judge other women. And so like, I think even a big part, to me, a big part of this is decentering men in all the ways that they've determined our worth, and setting a new standard of worth, which is really fucking hard. And that's been the journey that I've been on, and realizing how much in the past, like you mentioned, going to the gym felt like being on display, and just men looking at me, them too, but also women looking at me, but everyone looking at me through this lens of, this is what a woman is supposed to look like, right? And so being there thinking of myself as I'm in the gym, thinking about how am I looking as I'm exercising? Like, that's not what I should be thinking about, right? I should be thinking about my form. Am I doing these things in a way that's going to be safe for my body? But instead, I remember that feeling of like, do I look good while I'm running? Do I look good while I'm lifting, right? And I just think, I think a lot of us can relate to that. And so freeing yourself from that, it's hard to then return in a way, because you're like, I don't want to go back. Like there's that fear of like, if I go back to the gym, if I start to worry about, if I start to run again or lift or whatever the things are, am I gonna then, is that gonna pull me back into a lot of that old way of thinking that I've worked so hard to free myself from? So anyway, that's sort of been my journey in battle. And I don't know, Taina, if you want to share yours, or if Laura, you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll comment real quick. Yeah, I actually haven't been personally, I haven't been back to a commercial gym since the pandemic. So that was what, 2020? I let my gym membership lapse and then I just ended up canceling it. I've always worked in private gyms when I did work in a gym setting. So I always worked in a space that was by appointment only. So I never worked in a box gym or anything like that. It makes it a little bit more difficult to get clients because people aren't just walking by and walking in, seeing what you're doing. Number one, they don't pay you shit as a trainer in a box gym. But number two, I didn't want that environment for my clients. I just didn't want that atmosphere. And I liked the private gym space, but I even had issues with that. Like I would have issues with the noise levels. Sometimes people would be training and clanking weights around, and that can be rather jarring if somebody is sensitive to loud noises or something like that. So that could be a little bit. And then sometimes too, and I actually had to bring this up to the owner of the previous space I worked in. I didn't think the music was appropriate. There was lyrics I didn't think were appropriate for white people to be blasting in a gym with black and brown kids, high school kids in the space. I'm like, that does not sit right with me. That just does not, I don't think that's appropriate. And I mentioned it to the owner and he was like, nope, yep, taken, noted. I'm going to send an email out. So that was good. At least he was receptive to it. And he was a white guy. So I left that space a couple years ago and now I just rent a dance studio. Basically, when I need space, I just rent a studio that's a blank slate and I bring in my own stuff if I need to or what have you. But I think that's a lot more of a calmer space. Nervous system wise, I think it sits with people a little bit better. It doesn't have all the fancy equipment and everything, but most of my clients aren't working out with fancy equipment. Most of the time they're doing stuff at home, they're using bands, they have maybe some dumbbells at home. So they're not, going to the gym. I've had a handful of clients that go to like a Planet Fitness type situation, but I would say 9 times out of 10, it's people that are doing their own thing. So I didn't need all that stuff anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, Becky, I personally have not gone back. I'm actually toying with the idea of going back in the winter. And the only reason I'm toying with the idea of that is because last winter we had snow on the ground here in Cleveland for like 2 months and I couldn't walk outside. And the only reason I would go back would be like do like some cardio and stuff like that. But I would go in the off times when people it's not jam packed. They do say, and I've heard this from, men that I've listened to and things like that. I mean, that most of the time people aren't paying attention to you, that they're really kind of in their own world. I'm a white thin woman. I know people can't see me because this is a podcast, so I'm a white cisgender female and I'm thin bodied according to society standards. And even though my weight has actually fluctuated, like you said, Becky, mine's fluctuated about 40 pounds over the last few years. I fit the mold, but even still, I'd have a couple of guys like try to come up to me and I'm really good at my RBF. My RBF is on point. So my rusty bitch face. And I'm just like, no, not today. Like, no, I'm in my zone. Like, leave me alone. So I'm also very protective at the gym too. Like, I just don't want to be bothered. Like, I'm here to do my thing and whatever, and just leave me alone type situation. But I hate that people have been harassed or they have had negative, situations happen to them at the gym. I have heard stories of that happening to people, and it makes me mad because it shouldn't be a space like that. And people should, I knew somebody who was like photographed without their consent
Oh my gosh.
at a rec center, which is like
That
usually a rec
happens
center
all the time.
Yeah, and usually a rec center is more like family friendly.
Community.
Yeah, usually it's like an older crowd, especially like during the day. Yeah, she was one of my former colleagues actually. She was filmed without consent, so she had to go to like the manager and she's like, this person's filming, like clearly filming people. without their consent, and
I
that's
see this stuff on
methods.
social media, typically making fun of people in larger bodies who are trying to work out, right? And
Yeah.
I've seen that kind of content on social media, and it's clear that they're not being filmed with their consent and that sort of stuff.
Right.
But that is some of the reinforcement that I think keeps so many people from wanting to move their bodies. And again, whether it's in a gym space or on the side of the road using a public sidewalk to walk,
Yep.
or even in your own home, just knowing that stuff is happening, it does something to your own self-esteem and your own desire to move your body, because you can hear
100%.
those same voices. I can hear them in my head mocking me, right? Like I can hear that. So yeah, it's so upsetting. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but I think that's also why people like you, Laura, and like Marina that we've had on the podcast before, who Marina's less of a fitness coach and more of like a health coach, but like I think why it's important for coaches like you and Marina who have these values, right? To be out in these spaces, right? To work with people one-on-one, because you can then work with people in spaces and environments that they're comfortable in without having to feel like they have to put themselves in a space that feels unsafe or potentially unsafe, for something like that could be triggering. And so, I mean, we all grow up, right, with this cultural understanding of what it means to have a beautiful body, like what that's supposed to look like, which ironically changes every few years, right? Like I remember like in early 2010s, it was voluptuous, right? I'm thinking of the Kim Kardashians and like Beyonce and, people with like really curvy bodies. And now it feels like we're back to like the waif look of the
quote
90s.
unquote heroin chic.
Heroin chic.
That was my formative years too. Like I was in high school with those damn super low rise jeans that the Jessica Simpsons and everyone was wearing, and Christina Aguilera
Where you could
and
see
whatever.
the thong. Yeah.
Yeah, the whale tail. I mean, I remember all of it. And I
The whale
just
tail.
saw a girl posting on TikTok of her putting on those jeans, some young girl, and looking at them going like, is this what they're supposed to look like? She's like, how do you bend over? And I'm like, I remember all of that and how
You
damaging.
just show your crack, babe.
Right? And it was so damaging because I remember now I look at myself in photos at that same age and was like, holy smokes, I didn't realize how normal and thin, like even thin I was. But I remember when that was the desired body size, I felt so fat because I couldn't wear those jeans. I couldn't go to 579 to buy my clothes. And by the way, 579 is not what we think of as a 9, just so people know. But like,
it was more like a 135.
Right.
Like the joke.
And I remember what that did to me. And I was thrilled that I felt like we were moving away from a lot of that, and that girls had learned and society had learned what that was doing to us. And to see that stuff coming back, oh, fuck, it hurts my heart. It hurts my heart. I mean, I'm old enough that I don't have to try to do those styles. Like, I'm not expected to, don't want to, don't care. But like me and my heart aches for young girls again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's evidence of the fact that like we shouldn't be buying into those standards because they change, right? So like how often are we expected to change the way our bodies look to mold these standards, right? And I remember when I was in my 30s, was actually my early 30s is when I started to just kind of like really deconstruct my own views on like body image and, understand how harmful things like diet culture could be. Reading this article for a class I was taking, and it was a feminist media studies class. And it was really just laying the groundwork or the argument for how media is used to create these problems, right? Media is used to sell us on this idea that we have a problem with our bodies, and then they sell us the solution, right? So they create a problem and then they sell the solution, and then we buy into the solution. But then when that isn't working anymore, then they create a different problem and then they sell us the solution to that problem. And that's why body image fluctuates so much, right? Because it's a market. It's an economical kind of system built to keep people consuming a specific type of product, right?
A full capitalism.
Yeah, right. And so I'm curious, Laura, like I guess this breaks down into two questions. Like one, like when did you start your journey to become a fitness coach, right? Like, has this
Mm-hmm.
always been the thing? But then also, at what point in your own like journey were you like deconstructing diet
Yeah.
culture, like all the harmful aspects of that?
Yeah, for me, so my background's actually in nonprofit and marketing. I majored in film and journalism, which essentially I have a communications degree from Iowa. And then I got out of school and I had interned at my local film festival. I grew up in Florida, so I'd interned at my film festival, the Sarasota Film Festival, the previous summer, and I went back and was hired in for the festival season. So that's kind of like the closest I ever got to like the Hollywood kind of atmosphere. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to move to LA, work in the film industry. Like that's really what I thought I was going to do. And I did that for a season. And then because it's Florida and it's just it's the Wild West of the US, as we all know. And I would have to kind of take odd jobs here and there. I worked retail, went to a nonprofit and worked at a ballet. I learned a lot in all the jobs that I had. So I don't regret any of it. And then I went back the following year and worked at the film festival again. I had a different role. So the first year I was the press and industry ticketing supervisor, and the second year I was the assistant festival manager. And my boss, who's still a really good friend of mine, she just really trusted me. It's wild to think like I was 21, 22 when I first started working with her, and she just really trusted me and what I could do. And she was 10 years older than me and just saw potential, which was so lovely because I feel like sometimes women can not be that way. They can be very judgy and very micromanaging, and I don't think they're going to make it. And she was very enthusiastic and encouraging right out the gate, which was lovely. And we're still friends. Like we still talk. She lives in Florida. I'm planning on seeing her when I go down in December. And then I worked for a home builder in 05, 06, right before the housing market crash of 06 in Florida. I was the marketing manager. And I decided, so in that time, in that span of time, I had also started going to the gym more regularly. I had started going to an all women's gym, actually, which was really lovely. And I liked that space because I personally, now again, I was 20 something, I was a lot more aloof and I was a lot more naive at the time, right? I personally never saw people tearing each other down. I saw different body types there. Now, where I lived in Sarasota was very, I would say, predominantly white. There wasn't a lot of culture there. There still isn't. I mean, it's gotten a little bit better, but it's a very segregated community, if I had to be honest. It still is. Because it's Florida.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
A lot of retirees.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of retirees. So I started going to an all women's gym and I really liked the atmosphere. And I got super lucky in the fact that I started going to fitness classes and I had instructors that were not the kind of instructors that were cueing stuff like, you know, burn off those calories or, burn off that turkey dinner from Thanksgiving. I had really like they were cueing more about the body, like, how strong can you get? It was more about like strength. It was more about you as a person. It wasn't about your body size, which I very much in hindsight appreciated. And I was actually thinking about this the other day. One of the instructors and I became friends right before I moved to Ohio, and we fell out of touch for a little bit. Now we're actually back in touch now, which is great. So she was one of the people that kind of influenced me to get involved in the industry because I liked her. Her energy was good. She was definitely, I mean, she's the quintessential fitness instructor. She's very totally ripped, like very low body fat, but that's also her body. That's just how she is because I've known her now for a while and I know that's just how her body genetically is. It's not like she diets hard or anything like that. I've seen her eat a burger. Like she's not like, oh my God, like she eats normally. That's just genetically how she's blessed, how society would say she's blessed. I just say it's a body. She's got a body. That's just how her body is, right?
Mhm.
So then I came up to Cleveland and started working about a year, not quite a year here. I started working for a financial firm and I started in a marketing assistant role, worked my way up to the marketing director role. And I was working with business owners because essentially when you're working with financial advisors, they're their own business. They just work under the umbrella of a firm, but they have to pay for their own stuff, their marketing things and so on and so forth. So I was working with small business owners under the guise of corporate, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing that work and I was just like, man, I really feel like I could do more with marketing and helping people. But I don't want to do it here because there's a lot of red tape in the financial industry, a lot of red tape. Compliance is just like a whole different ball game, thanks to people like Bernie Madoff, who have just made it like super impossible for people to be creative in that industry because somebody breaks all the rules and then all of a sudden, like, everybody has to adhere to all these like very, 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 very strict guidelines. And in that time, I was very entrenched in diet culture. So I moved up here, started reading, like Shape. I was reading Shape magazine at that time. I got into Clean Eating magazine around that time. And I still like take recipes from Clean Eating magazine. There are some good recipes, but I don't preach any kind of clean eating. I think they should rebrand, honestly, because like I just don't think that's because they've actually broken away from a lot of that too. They're not like only use, this type of cream or whatever. Like they'll actually use like real fucking cream now, which is nice to see like in a recipe. But I was very entrenched in it at that time and, very like this is what I'll eat, brought my lunch to work every day, was very strict was very regimented about my diet. I followed different diets. I tried like keto, I tried paleo, I tried all those different types of things just to see how they would land in my body.
Yeah.
And I think it was right around, even when I started my business in 2017, I never was adamant about weight loss as my marketing messaging, as my message.
Yeah.
I never was like, okay, if you work with me, you're going to lose 10 pounds. Like I never, as far as I remember, I don't recall, even if I look at like really old social media posts, I was never like, work with me for 3 months, lose 10 pounds, because I just never felt like that message was positive, and I never felt like it was true, because you can't guarantee somebody's outcome ever about anything. You just can't. And like, I get pissed off when I like listen to business coaches and stuff because they're like, oh, sell people the result, sell people the result. And I'm like, I don't know what the result's going to be. Like, I can do the best that I can. And one of my big things now is like, I like to get people out of pain and help people get out of pain. And I think I do a pretty good job of it. But sometimes it gets to a point where I need another professional to come in and work with me, like a physical therapist. Like I can get somebody to a certain point, then I'm like, okay, well, we're dealing with a tear, or we're dealing with this, we're dealing with that. I'm like, I know my scope of practice, and I'm like, I gotta farm this out to somebody else, But I think for me too, what really sealed the deal was like, in that 2019, 2020 timeframe when like things started getting really ugly, and I started going deeper into anti-racism and body liberation work, and realizing like, oh shit, a lot of this is tied up in the same, what this fellow colleague of mine, Jenna, calls the same shit sandwich, right? Like, that's the same thing, right? Like us preaching thinness is us preaching anti-Blackness and anti-fatness and anti anything that's not, white, thin, society accepted bodies, right? And I read Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings, which was a very heavy read. I kind of was one of those you had to read and then put it down, and then read and put it down. I know you guys have talked about that on the podcast as well. And really started, I read, Sonia Renee Taylor's book as well. And then Chrissy King's book, if you haven't heard of Chrissy King, The Body Liberation Project. She was actually the first person I really started to learn from about anti-fatness, anti-Blackness in the fitness space. Like right around the time like things were kind of shutting down, I was like, ooh, who's this person? I want to learn from her. And I read her book, and she and I've actually DM'd on Instagram, which I'm like, ooh, she's got like 70,000 followers. Like, how does she care about me? She'll thank me when I share her stuff. Like, she's that cool. I love her. So I really started opening up that can of worms, and I was like, yeah, thank God I had never really gone down that path, but I'm really glad now I didn't really hardcore go down that path. And then for me personally, it started going into like, I don't want my clients to feel like there's something wrong with their body and the way it is. Like, I want people to feel like they can gain strength, and maybe, I don't know if their body's going to change or not. Maybe not. I don't know. I can't predict anything. I don't read blood work. I don't read fecal exams. I don't read, like, bodies are so different. Bodies carry stress differently. Like I talked about earlier, genetics, huge, right? Like you can't ignore genetics, like genetics are genetics. And so I really just started unpacking all of that and being like, oh man, yeah, I'm really glad I didn't bark up that tree and start shoving that message down people's throats, because I think it's super important. Like, all bodies are allowed to exist, and all bodies, but unfortunately we live in a society where like we don't make airplane seats comfortable enough for all bodies, and we don't make I'm seeing it more now when I go to the doctor. Like, waiting rooms are becoming more inclusive, so they're starting to make
the chairs are bigger,
which is great. I'm so happy to see that. But like, I've read Aubrey Gordon's work too, like 19 Myths About Fat People. Maintenance Face is her podcast. She's really awesome, and she talks about living in a fat body and how like, this is my body, like it's always been like this, and like this is how it's going to be. And my husband, I just had him read her book because he's had some diet culture stuff too, and it really opened his eyes. He's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, not all. We just think automatically, like when we see someone in a larger body, like, oh, they don't take care of themselves, and it's like, that is so not true. There's just so many layers of. There are people in larger bodies that take care of themselves way better than people in straight, thin-sized bodies. Way better. But because they're in a straight, thin-sized body, we just automatically equate that to they're healthier.
health,
even if they're chain smoking and all these things that maybe aren't so good for them.
Fin. I remember those days to get into those little pants. It's like chain smoking, taking fin. What are you doing to your heart, right?
Yeah.
Well, you talked about strength training, and then Taina, you mentioned like bone density, and it's interesting because as you age, like you start to think about your body differently as well, and like just it becomes less about how do I. Although I say this, but then like my mom, I know you probably listen, and I love you. She's in her, we'll say 70s, we won't say her age, and she still cares a lot about the aesthetics of her body. But also she cares more about, finally, too, about like just how do I make this body last longer, right? Because I want to live longer. And I think as you start to get older, my hope for people is that they don't have to wait until they're older to have that changeover, that you could just stop caring about the aesthetics of your body and start thinking about the mechanics of your body earlier on. But that's sort of the place I think I am, and Taina, where you are too, where it's like I'm starting to think more just about the mechanics of my body, like especially for me, my heart, because I suffer from anxiety. I think I have a heart attack pretty much every day. I'm pretty certain every day I'm having a heart attack. But I do consider
like you sound like Mellow.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm like
my wife.
The number of searches in my phone history for signs of a heart attack, I have them memorized at this point, but I'm still constantly looking like maybe there's going to be something that's going to tell me, no, this time it really is a heart attack. And so I'm sure that's how I'll die because I will dismiss it as anxiety. But anyway, I do think about things like heart health. I do think about things like, I've seen a lot more older women with, the kind of the hump or
that
the hump
stoop,
that happen. And I find myself worrying more about posture and sitting upright and like, how do I make sure my bones don't get more brittle, because they are, but how do I slow that process without it having to just look like medical interventions, just medications, right? Like, yes, I'm happy those things exist. I want to be able to have statins if I need them. I want to be able to take drugs for, osteoporosis if I need them. But are there things I can do to help stave off some of that? But when we think about things like weightlifting, like I think there's also just even around that stuff. So forget about the diet culture and the like exercising to lose weight. But I think there's also these thoughts of like, I hear it all the time of like, well, I'm not a weightlifter. I don't want to do strength training because I don't want to be bulky, or I'm not the kind of person who's ever going to lift 200 pounds. And I think there's also just a lot of misperceptions about what it looks like to take care of your body in this other way that's outside of just the way it looks, of like bulking it up, like to be in a. So anyway, how do you talk to people about things like strength training or, density stuff, heart health?
So for me, I a lot of times will equate. So going back to like what I talked about earlier about like pain management. So 9 times out of 10, a lot of pain in the body didn't just happen overnight. Now it's different if it was like trauma, right? If we were like in a car accident, we fell, okay, like that type of stuff, that's totally, that happens, and that's trauma to the body, and that can rattle things around. But a lot of injury is actually like built over time. It's the body compensating over time. So it's muscle compensation patterns. So if you think of like a 3-legged, like a table, and then if like, one leg is broken, then the other ones are going to have to hold the table up. And the body is like that too. So if someone has like a foot injury, for example, and they've been compensating for years, you don't see it necessarily. I can see it because I've been trained to see it and trained to measure it, but there's a discrepancy happening with like their hip or whatever, something's going on. And there's a muscle that's usually compensating for that injury or ailment that's been going on for however long, years, months, whatever. So that's where I come in with the alignment work and I say, okay, like let's align the body first to a safe space where things are foundationally looking pretty good. And then we take it into resistance training. Now, people are like, resistance training. I don't care if you buy a set of bands off Amazon and do it at home. I don't care if you've got, some people have some dumbbells. They actually make adjustable dumbbells now, which are nice too. They don't take up as much space as if you bought like sets and sets of dumbbells, you just get adjustable ones. Because I worked with people who lived in smaller spaces, like apartments and things like that. They don't have space for that kind of stuff. That's just not feasible. What I always say is like, what do you want to do? What do you enjoy doing? Oh, I love to garden. I love to, walk with my kid in the summer. I love to hike. Cool. You want to keep doing that, right? Till you're like older? Well, yeah, I do. I definitely do. Okay, cool. Awesome. The body needs, the way we create strength is with load, is with contraction. So anytime you're lifting a weight, you're contracting the muscle to do that. Contraction builds strength. So that's where I always come in and say, okay, cool. This doesn't have to be lifting a 200-pound barbell at the gym. It does not. Because how often are you going to do that? But every day we're lifting things, right? We're lifting kids, we're lifting groceries,
furniture, books.
Yeah, we're making shapes with our bodies.
Yeah.
If we have yards in the summer, right? We're doing yard work or we're gardening or whatever people do in that regard. So we're always making cool different shapes with our bodies. And the point for me is to say, I want you to be able to continue to make shapes with your body and not be in pain doing it and be able to do it for the long haul. And quick, personal story, but my father passed away last year and my father was active his entire life. And I tell you, that saved him. Like up until he couldn't really move anymore, my father was in hospice and eventually had to be like bedridden and stuff. But he was so good about physical therapy, going to the gym, doing his yoga. Now, we're hypermobile, so that means that we have more laxity in our joints. That is genetic sometimes. I've noticed it in him and his sisters and me. So it's definitely a genetic thing in my family. So we're just more like bendy in our joints. But he was so good about his movement. I'll call it. I just call it movement, honestly. I don't even call it sometimes weight training. I'm just like movement. And because of that, I really, truly believe that he lasted way longer than he probably would have otherwise because he was so good about walking, doing things that, he was 73 when he passed away. So he was a senior, right? Technically, but he could still move his body pretty well. He had some ailments and stuff like that from wear and tear over time. But I remember distinctly like the last couple of days when he could still like move his legs around and stuff. And he's on his back doing a figure 4 position. And I'm like, and it's so interesting to me how like the body doesn't give up at the end until it really has to. His body still wanted to move at the end. He was like he had what was called restless, like some type of restless syndrome people get sometimes when they're heading out, they're transitioning. And it was amazing to me. So I witnessed his body just like, no, I'm not ready yet. I'm not done here. And I think it was a testament to his commitment to continuing to move his body until he couldn't.
Yeah.
So, we talk about like doing things I always think about like, what do I want to do in 20 years? I still want to be able to like hike and travel and go places and do things. And I don't want to have to worry about, my knees hurting or my, ankles hurting. And I've had my own stuff too. Like I'm not perfect at all. I've definitely had some injuries and ailments that I work through. I work with other people too on my body. So I'm also doing the work just like my clients are.
Coaches need coaches.
But
yeah. I think that's a really good point because it's like what you were just saying, Sarah, and Becky, what you were saying too about just like, it's really just about making sure we like feel good in our bodies to live the kind of life we want to, right? Like, I don't want to be like 60 years old and can't garden or can't travel because my body can't handle it. Like I want to be able to still do the things that I enjoy doing now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, for as long as I can. in order to like live a life that feels fulfilled, right? And I think part of that goes back to feeling safe in my body.
Mhm.
Like you were
Mhm.
mentioning at the beginning of the episode, Laura, like feeling safe in my body, feeling at home in my body. When so much of what we see on a day-to-day basis through culture, through media, through all kinds of things is about making us feel unsafe in our bodies.
Mhm.
You could live a life with no trauma and still feel unsafe in your body, right? Because of the society that we live in. Now, I am almost 100% certain that there is no one on this planet who has not endured some kind of trauma.
Especially not a woman or
Or a
anyone, right?
femme. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or a
Yeah. Oh
non-binary
yeah.
or queer person or a black
Yes.
and brown person, right? Like
Right.
our bodies suffer a lot of trauma, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
through the hand of someone else, whether it's through like medical trauma or disability, right? And so there are so many ways to feel unsafe in your body. There's so many ways to not feel at home in your body that it almost sounds like the first step is mental, right? Mental and emotional, right? Like being able to get to the point where mentally and emotionally you desire that before you can like physically engage with any kind of activity that is going to take you there. And so I guess my question is like, for people who like how often do you encounter that mental and emotional block when you're working with people, and like what happens then?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of my clients are, I would say 9 times out of 10, usually my clients are seeing me and also seeing a therapist. Not necessarily for body image, but for just mental health regardless. I think it's interesting. I'm not going to obviously name names, but the last 2 clients I brought on in my practice were also recovering from their fathers passing away. I don't think that's an accident. I think that sometimes not to sound wooey, but I think the universe kind of delivers who you need in your corner at certain times. So I think that's just a coincidence. But yeah, I would say a lot of times my clients are working through grief. I had a client working through doing somatic work from trauma. They're usually working through some type of mental health stuff that's may or may not be body related. And then I bring that in and then I say, hey, so, I know that on your application or we initially talked about, you're not super comfortable in your body. And I think where I get a little irked with a lot of people in my industry, especially people in like the dietitian space sometimes, is that they'll have clients come to them and say, well, I want to lose weight. And they'll say, okay, but they're not asking the deeper question of why. Like, where did that come from? Because we didn't just come into the world and go, I want to lose weight.
Yeah.
That was a message that was ingrained to us over time, right? So I feel like it's my duty to go deeper with people and be like, where did this messaging start? Where did it come from? Like when did you start feeling like you weren't yourself in your body? Most of us, it was probably around, I would say, like, probably honestly, some people elementary school, definitely middle school, high school,
Yeah.
right? That's when people get exposed to, and even though like I know the 3 of us are a little bit older and we didn't have social media in our youth, thank God, but we had, we still had like MTV, we still had, magazines, like 17
MTV, they
magazine.
just announced they're going out of business. It makes me feel so old.
But we had all that we just had exposure in a different way. Right now the kids, I feel like, oh my God, I'm like, I can't even imagine.
It's like
Talking,
100
It's
times
awful.
worse.
It's 100 times worse.
Can I pop in really quick to suggest a
Yeah.
book? Just because it relates to what you just said about the ages at which we start to get this messaging. There's this
Yeah.
great book for people watching the video, or I'll tell you, but it's called Why Does Patriarchy Persist by Carol
Yeah.
Gilligan and Naomi Snyder. It's definitely sort of a theoretical, like research-based kind of book, but it talks about basically the psychology of patriarchy, like when we are inducted into it. And it talks about the stages of life. So for boys, there's this very clear demarcation that happens for them where, and I see it with my son because he's really at that sort of peak age where they're no longer allowed, quote unquote, to be soft, to be sweet. Right. And they have to learn how to be hard and masculine. And that starts to happen for them right around my son's age, sort of in this like 8, 9, 10 kind of age. For girls, it tends to be a little bit later. It tends to be there's usually there's one sort of introduction period, but for girls it's a little bit later where we around, no surprise, when we go through puberty, right? So which is actually happening younger now. So instead of it being 12, it is almost the same as boys. So it's more like this 9, 10, 11, 12, where we're no longer allowed to be tomboys, quote unquote, rough and tumble and play. Like we have to learn to be feminine, right?
Mhm.
Because we now have these bodies that are representative of femininity. All of this is like bullshit, obviously, but it's a really interesting book if you want to like, especially for parents, I think, but learning and understanding like how that indoctrination happens and when it happens. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt specifically. I was like, this book
No, you're
really
good.
gets into that. And you're right. I mean, for most of us, it happens early, but the real stuff around our bodies tends to coincide with our bodies changing. And that's when we start to get those messages because now you get boobs, now you get curves, right? Now things are starting to happen and we get these messages that those things are either good if you're developing in the way that you're quote unquote supposed to, or they're bad because now you're getting too many curves. You're getting too much breast tissue, right? You're not fitting into the mold. And that's when we often are starting to get the worst and most extreme of that messaging that our bodies don't fit the narrative.
Yeah. Quick question about that book. Do they break it down by like culture or like racial demographics?
They don't do the best job of this. It's 2 white women. So I would say good call. And as most things are, it's very much based on white folks. It's been a while since I read it, so it's a great question. Clearly, I liked it, though, because I highlighted a lot that I thought was really interesting. But I should go back and reread it now and see what I think if they do that. But my guess is it's probably pretty whitewashed, as are a lot of these kinds of things, sadly.
Yeah.
Good call.
Another one I like. It is. I think they do actually bring up some ethnicity stuff in this book a little bit. Is More Than a Body by Lindsay and Lexi Kite. That was one of the first ones I read. Similar type of book, yeah. And it was about like othering your body and what age that happens. And they're twins. They were swimmers, and then like you just said, Becky, right around puberty, they were like, I don't want to get in the pool anymore. Like I don't want to, and like how they felt about their bodies. And then they did do some research, obviously, with different groups of people, white women, Black girls, brown girl, like obviously it's different things in different cultures. And just about how it's all across the board. It's definitely an all across the board sort of topic. It doesn't just affect one person or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, just thinking about culturally specific like expectations for how we perform femininity or masculinity and how we're expected to shape our bodies. I think there's obviously differences across different cultures and ethnicities and races and stuff. And there's I feel like it probably happens a lot younger for young girls who are not white. There's like this kind of dual expectation sometimes to be grown, like to act grown, while also like maintaining this sense of innocence. Like I can't tell you how many times when I was a child, like younger than 10, I was told to like not sit with my legs open or like like certain things that I would wear or how I would like position my body because it would be tempting, the implication was that it would be tempting to like, to older
There's been
men.
a lot of studies that have shown that young Black girls are sexualized at a much earlier age than white girls. In the same way that young Black boys are treated and expected to behave as older than they are at a much younger age. So,
Which that intersects, right, with diet culture, right?
Absolutely.
With body image issues, because diet culture exists for the sexualization of women, right? Because it's positioning women and bodies to be available for the male gaze.
Well, there's also different expectations around around beauty standards in different cultures as well. And then there's also that inevitable cultural appropriation that happens, right? So like when you talk about that voluptuous look, like that was happening inside of Black and brown cultures, like Black cultures, Latina cultures, before white women, right? And then Kardashian kind of comes along. We could talk all kinds of stuff about the Kardashians and that stuff, but and then there's this like appropriation that happens, and then suddenly white women are now expected to have these same kind of curves with the the bigger behinds and the thinner waist and whatever, where previously, I don't know, I'm curious, I don't know, Taina, from your experience, but like, I feel like that waif heroin chic thing in the 90s felt like it was more expectations among white girls. Whereas, and I don't know, did that feel like it was also pervasive into Black culture in your experience? You might have been a little younger.
Yeah, I think I was a little too young to really notice it too much, but I think like within Black or like women of color circles, like the expectation has always been different. But that's not to say that there isn't a white gaze upon like Black and brown
Exactly.
women, right? So like
Oh,
there's like the
100%.
male gaze, but then there's also like the white gaze. And so,
Which probably creates this weird split dynamic of like dual
yes,
expectations on how you show up, and then you can't win
yeah,
because you can't be
yeah,
both.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a lose-lose for sure. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, and I
you,
sort of feel like if you are born not cis het male, white male, we're
you're just
all in a
fucked.
it's lose-lose for all of us, right? But I mean,
Yeah,
I understand these added pressures, which
yeah,
I think we always
yeah,
have to bring in. But yeah, like
yeah,
none of our bodies are none of our bodies fit the
yeah,
mold of what we're
yeah,
supposed to be.
yeah.
Like that is such
And
a small
I
group.
would even argue if you are born cis heterosexual white male, you're still fucked also. Like this shit
Oh
is too
yeah.
toxic for you. Like
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
Well,
all
in our
the
current bro culture
right.
and the
Like
ways
it's
that they
not
are
healthy
trying,
for anybody.
I know, and
It's
it's
not
so
healthy
gross
for
because
anybody.
we look at those men and I always think like, who are you doing it for? In the same way that often women are dressing for and trying to lose weight for ultimately for women and the judgment they receive from other women, men are doing that same thing for other men because every woman I know looks at those like beefed up beefcake guys and is like, that's not what
Yeah.
we want. But they're doing it for each other. And it's so unhealthy. I mean, so many of these people who are perpetuating, you talked about keto and like the caveman culture and whatever, like they're doing really harmful things to their bodies in the name of quote unquote fitness as well. And
Right.
it's like, who are we even listening to?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's even beyond doing harmful things to your body, it's doing harmful things to your emotional and mental health. Like you are self-othering, right?
Yeah.
Like we are taught to other our bodies. And it's not, at that point, it's not just other people othering us. Now it's us ourselves othering us as
Mm,
well. So if you're
Yeah.
buying into diet culture, if you're buying into all that harmful shit, like you are objectifying yourself at the same time, right? And so there's a detachment from your physical entity, your corporeal body that has to happen in order to believe those things. And I think that's why the work, Laura, that you do and people like Marina, like it's so important because it helps people to reconnect,
Mm-hmm.
right? To close that gap so that there's a connection between the mind and the body and the spirit and the body and the emotions and the body, and in a way that helps us to feel more whole and not so like separate or compartmentalized.
Yeah. For me, it was like I started gaining, I turned 40 in 2022. And for me, my body just started changing. I started gaining more weight in my midsection. I've always had just my thighs. I was a dancer as a kid. I was a ballet dancer as a kid. But even then, like my thighs have always just been a stronger part of my body. And for me, the message became, okay, what if this is your body's way of protecting you? What if your body is saying, enough? We've dieted on and off for like a decade. We're done. We're going to protect you now. And when I started thinking of it that way, when I started thinking of it, my body protecting me, because like knock on wood, I'm battling a little bit of an upper respiratory thing today, but like I don't get sick a lot. And I only have had COVID once. So like maybe it's my body's way of protecting me. And when I started to like have that message, I felt like, because our bodies are so smart and they really do truly hold on to fat and things like that for a reason,
Yeah.
yeah.
for a reason. And what I've noticed, in my work too, going back to what you talked about, you asked me earlier, Taina, I think a lot of it too is nervous system work, which I do a lot more of now than I ever did before. Right. So I always am cognizant that I'm coaching and teaching to people's nervous systems, and I'm trying to meet their nervous system where it's at. And that's also combining the mind and the body together. But yeah, when I started thinking about like, this is keeping my body safe. And what I'm starting to notice now too is like older women who are losing weight, not on like GLP-1s or anything, but they're just losing weight like beyond, I would say, at the age of 60. When they lose a significant amount of weight, the next thing I hear is an osteoporosis or an osteoarthritis diagnosis. And I'm like, it's because your body needs that body fat for the muscles and the bones to have a cushion, to have something
Insulation.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you lose it at that older age where your bones are already getting like a little more, I don't want to say brittle, but you're losing bone density. And then you lose a bunch of weight on top of it, your body's like, what the hell just happened? Like, what is going on here? And I've seen people lose like dramatic amounts of weight in that. When I say dramatic, I would say like 30 pounds plus. And I'm like, and they're like, I feel great. But then like a year later, they're like, and now I have osteoporosis and now I have osteoarthritis. And I'm like, there's not any evidence yet out there. Like, but I've talked to somebody who works with like that population, like senior women. And she's like, yeah, I'm seeing it too. And I'm like, our bodies are smart. If we just trusted them to like hold on to a little bit, like body fat's good for you. Like we all need body fat. Like even people I know who run lean are like, I want body fat on my body because I know that it's important, because if I don't have it, I do run the risk of more issues with my joints and things like that. So like, you know what I mean? That's where we also have to.
I love the idea of intuitive eating and like just learning to listen to our bodies, but it can be hard because there's so much noise. It's hard to understand what is your body. I wanted to also just say, because you're talking about older women, I think one of the gifts of aging for me has been realizing that I have aged out of beauty standards, because conventional beauty standards, everything about beauty is trying to look young, right? Everything is like, how do you, because even what you're talking about with being thin, having nothing in your middle section. But when we turn 40 and start to age, our body shape changes and it no longer fits the quote unquote beauty standard, because it's based on young women, and might I even say perhaps girls, because I think there is some real sick shit, twisted shit in the male game as well, right? So, See, when you age out of that, it's like, oh, what a gift. I can't be beautiful, quote unquote beautiful, right? When I think the natural way that we all look is beautiful. So I'm saying I can't meet the beauty standard. Why am I even trying? Like nothing I do will ever be able to be beautiful anymore, because I can't look 20 unless you're Kris Jenner and spend $1 bazillion on whatever the hell she just had done. And even then, you don't look 20. You look like you're 70 trying to look 20. So like, it just doesn't.
Right.
Anyway, I think that's a gift. Our time is almost up. I didn't want to have this conversation because I didn't love these topics. However, here I am. I had plenty to say. So see, even when I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about my body has things it once heard.
Thank you for joining us, Laura. Tell people where they can find you. And I know you have you do periodically like a free like alignment workshop, and I think you have coming up. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram at Laura Thomas Fitness, Laura Thomas. I think it's Laura A. Thomas on LinkedIn. And then, yes, I have one of my free workshops is coming up on November 8th. And it is my free alignment workshop where we just talk about how the body moves, why we care about alignment before strength and function. And we really focus on the 4 types of tightness and how only one of them actually needs lengthening or stretching, and the other 3 actually need contraction or strength, what I talked about earlier. And that's free. So that's going to be a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, coming up in November in a couple weeks, 3 weeks. And that's on my website, laurathomasfitness.com. You can find it on there under services and register for that. It's totally free. And yeah, you can always hop on my newsletter too, as well, over on my website. And I send out a newsletter once or twice a week.
Awesome.
All that'll be in the show notes too.
Yes.
Awesome.
And so if you're listening live, like when this comes out, that won't have happened yet. If you're listening after, I'm sure you'll have updated services as well. So. My DoorDash just got here, y'all.
That's so cute.
Thank you so much for being here, Laura.
Thanks for listening to Messy Liberation.
Thank you so much for your support and for listening today.
Until next time.